So let's get started, everyone. Hi there, my name is Mary Eleanor Power, and I am the Director of Marketing Communications with the Faculty of Open Learning and Career Development at Dalhousie University. And I am delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, which will be hosted by Ori Shibi. And before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all treaty people. And Ori, who will be walking us through today's webinar, has over 25 years experience providing practical new ways of leading sustainable change through ambiguous conditions, managing projects and programs, and helping organizations maximize the benefits from being agile. As a visionary thought leader, Ori introduces practical ideas in areas related to project sponsorship, PMO, connecting change initiatives to projects, and collaboration within and across projects. Ori has been engaged in ensuring that agile rollouts take place in the context of the organizational change they introduce to ensure alignment and success. Ori is the author of 4 books. He has developed a line of dynamic and innovative workshops and programs and has led sessions, delivered keynotes, and taught thousands of participants in multiple settings. He is known for his unique, dynamic, and capturing style, and for his high impact, real life, easy to understand examples. Awesome. Ori, thank you so much for joining us today. And I will pass it over to you. If there are any questions throughout, we'd encourage people to add them into the chat. And there will be polls throughout. And so please don't be shy in answering your questions. And Ori, take it away.
Thank you so much. Sounds like a great guide that you described now, all these. All right, thank you, everyone. Welcome. Yeah, I've been doing all these things related to change, right? Agile and project management and change and back and forth and back and forth. And change has always been, right? It's just that in the last few years, it became a bigger word. And also we can say that in the last few years, the pace and the magnitude of change definitely has gone up. So if, let's say, rewinding, I don't know, 10 years ago, we would have said, oh, wow, look at all that change, look at what's going on. And now that we look back at 10 years ago, it looks like a walk in the park, right? I mean, it was so easy. There were so few changes, right? Then came that Corona that imposed so many changes on us. Some of them have not been undone. Some of them are going to stay. And also, necessity is always the trigger to so much innovation and change. So many things have changed for the better, but still change. Being able to work remotely and whatnot. So let's see in the next half hour or so what exactly we're going to do here. And generally, this is all in the context of that change management certification, right? That is offered at Dalhousie, which is very practical in the sense that it really takes multiple disciplines related to change and multiple approaches and puts them together to enable, right? And still being able to deal with the challenges that we have, with the pace, with the magnitude, and probably above all these things, with the number of changes that are going on all at the same time, intertwined and interlocking with each other. Well, we talked about Mary Eleanor. There's no picture of me because, well, you can see me now in the video. As far as logistics, Mary Eleanor said, feel free to use the chat. We're going to monitor that. And when you have anything to ask, I'll be happy to actually address that. Sometimes the questions are actually very timely, so there's no point in waiting with them. That's what we're going to do here. We're going to talk a little bit about that new world that we're facing, about some of the challenges in relation to change, and then a few things about the change process. One of the main problems that Marilyn also alluded to was the challenge that we have in connecting change initiatives to projects. Right? After all, projects are the tactical ways to drive in and introduce change and strategy, right? I mean, projects, that's how we do things. And many times there's a disconnect. back in the 1990s, one of the best known theorists and practitioners in change management, John Carter, said that best known not necessarily with the best approach, but nevertheless we cannot undermine his contribution. He said that around 80% of change initiatives end up failing. Now, first of all, when we say failing, it doesn't necessarily mean that they crash and burn, right? Failing, it means they may not make it to the end, they may fail to deliver the full intent, they may fall short and whatnot, but still, 80% is a scary number. When we fast forward 10 years later in the early 2000s, it was McKinsey that actually reinforced that message and said that even more than 80%, and we can see now, yes, more than 80%. So generally more than 4 out of 5 initiatives fail. Doesn't mean that these are bad initiatives, and most likely it's going to be related to that disconnect that we have, that somehow that great idea is not necessarily trickled down through the organization properly. And then we're going to talk about what's next. So the new world, there is a little bit of a paradigm shift. We still don't know to what, but there is a paradigm shift. There has to be, definitely has to be a paradigm shift where we need to focus more on value creation and on what we do as opposed to trying to do more of everything, right? This will require us to break silos, because right now still organizations operate in silos, and more so than before, even because of the distributed nature of all of us, right? Instead of sitting in a central location. So that paradigm shift, definitely there's been some change in priorities. Every time there is any type of a shock like we've been going through in the last, 15 days since March of 2020, priorities are changing and views are changing. And of course, the way of doing things is changing. Now, because there's so much change in so many places, it's still hard to see how exactly it's shaping up, but we definitely need, and it's well overdue, and this need had been there before the corona, they need to focus on what we do. And like I said, instead of trying to do more of everything, we should try to, yes, capture, their needs, but we definitely need to, be able to focus more on delivering success on the high priority items. And for that, we need to be able to prioritize, which is somewhat an extension of portfolio management, right? Where we need to understand our capacity, something that we are all bad at, right? If I'm just going to ask you, every day in the morning, you come in to work, 8, 9 a.m. or whatever, and then you have a list of things that you want to do today. Then if you fast forward to 5 p.m. or to the end of your day, it's going to be interesting to track how many of those things that you intended to do in the morning you actually completed. And generally, the answer is not very encouraging, right? Generally, we don't get to actually do most of the things that we intend to because of the nature of the day and the interruptions and whatnot, right? So we got to be able to recognize that's the reality. That's our capacity. It doesn't mean that the rest of the time you don't do anything. You still add value, but we want to be able to know how much you can actually plan on doing every day. And then within that, you've got to be able to prioritize. And your manager needs to be able to help you, just like you need to be able to help those who report to you. It's not enough just to say, oh, you had 10 things to do today. Here, I'm giving you the 11th item. Go and work faster, work smarter, work better, right? That's not the way. I need to tell you, if I'm your manager, okay, I now added an item. It's coming in as item number 3 over there, and it's going to come as much as possible in lieu of those other low priority items that are below. We can't just try to cram in, because we all know when it comes to project management, scope, time, cost, right? Quality, something's got to give. If I give you more work, but I don't give you more capacity, that is money and resources, and I don't give you more time, you're going to have to make tough decisions. And for that, we also need to break the silos, right? Once again, way overdue, right? How? we will need to build some more collaboration, right? How do we collaborate? We need to do more cross-project and cross-initiative collaboration. So that means that project managers and operation managers, right, team leads need to be able to plan, maybe in intervals of a couple of weeks, what type of resources and how many they're going to need for doing the work based on the priorities. And then we're going to have to compare notes. And whenever we have resources that are overbooked, we're going to have to try to address that, because it's not going to fix itself on its own. Right? So we're going to have to figure out who gets which project, which initiative gets the right of way, and which project or initiative will end up falling behind, which is, again, a strategic decision. By the way, that's also, speaking of organizational change, that's also going to help us identify over time areas where we have chronic shortage of resources. This is where we're going to be able to actually address that shortage by either cross-training, adding capacity, or changing our priorities. So the challenge that we are facing now is a combination of the existing initiatives, right? There's still organizational change initiatives that we have been going through or that are part of long-term plans and directions. There are, of course, the new initiatives that are introducing themselves as part of doing our business, but then there are the forced initiatives. For example, working remotely or combining working remotely or in a distributed fashion and in the office, with all the changes that it introduces as far as collaboration, relationships, effectiveness, efficiency, and so on. It also says here distributed teams and virtual skills. And it's interesting to note that we're now using the term more and more distributed teams as opposed to remote teams, because remote teams, for example, if everybody's sitting in Nova Scotia and I'm sitting in according to some center of the universe in Toronto, I'm remote because you're all in one location. But now that we are all over the place, even though you may all be in Nova Scotia or in Atlantic Canada, you're still in your home offices for the most part. In that case, we are all distributed, right? Because there's no central location. Even if there is a head office, nobody's essentially there. There's another aspect that comes to mind and practicality when we refer to distributed teams, and it's the need for distributed leadership and distributed communications. What do I mean by that? The leader needs to distribute some of his or her authority and responsibility, right, to different members of the team, because we can no longer do stuff in a centralized way, right? So that's part of the distribution too, by empowering, by delegating, and of course, these things involve some level of risk. The other part is in the communications, and this is more on the virtual side, of course. We got to be able to actually really improve on communications. I know that everybody is perfect in their communications, of course, and it's the rest of the world that doesn't know how to do it, but we got to be able to sharpen up our communications, focus more, reduce redundancy. And reduce redundancy is not only with the words, right? It's not only with the noise that accompanies most of the things that we do. It's also with meetings. Less people, shorter meetings, less people in the meeting, shorter meetings, more focused, and more pointed communications, because if in person we can still overcome that somehow, even though it's really involving a lot of waste, in the distributed environment, it's just going to lead to too much noise and not enough practicality, right? So remember that Corona thing introduced social, economic, and cultural shock, and these shocks always lead to changes, improvements, innovations. But the bottom line is that we must deal with those things in addition to all the things that the organization has to deal with as far as ongoing and upcoming initiatives. But at the same time, it will require us to refocus and properly prioritize, because we got to come to the realization that not all the things that are out there as far as challenges, opportunities, problems, right? Not all these things are within reach. right? And if we start doing proper pre-initiative, right, proper due diligence as far as business case analysis and feasibility analysis, we're going to be able to filter out items, right? Business case is about justification. What's the right thing to do out of all these things in the pipeline? And the feasibility is another filter afterwards, that once we realize that certain items are worthy of doing as far as cost benefit priority, right? We got to check from a feasibility perspective, are these things within reach, right? Resource wise, capacity wise, money wise, cash flow, other initiatives. We got to be able to do that. We cannot just pump in anymore as senior management, pump in anymore, more and more items and expect the teams to somehow pull superhuman capabilities in the effort to actually achieve those things. So the process of change, let's talk about a few things that we got to recognize. Let's call them pieces of truth about change. Let's recognize change is hard to manage and to lead. It's expensive, it takes time. And if somebody tells you that it's going to be short, quick, easy, and cheap, better run the other way, right? Because it's probably not going to be that case. Also keep in mind that change is going to have resistance, always. Always is a strong word, and there always going to be resistance. But people really don't resist the idea or the change, they resist the pain. They say, listen, I'm in a good position right now. Don't bother me with that. The fact that you have a problem doesn't mean that I need to pay a price for it. But we somehow got to give them the realization, help them realize that the current state, the status quo, is no longer, even though it has been the right way of doing things, it's no longer acceptable due to whatever circumstances we have. We got to show them that the journey and the pain are going to be worth it, and we got to prove to them that the destination is really something that's going to be better for them, which are not easy things to do. Also, let's recognize a few barriers. One barrier is failure to see or being blinded by the light, right? Failure to see the need and or failure to see the light is that brighter future that we're offering that sometimes people just get overwhelmed by. Also, we fail to do the right thing, right? That goes under the category of ego, right? I mean, generally, when I choose to do something, I can always justify that. It's always the right thing, right? Because I want to save face, right? That's when the ego takes over and makes the decisions for me or for others. Another barrier is that we focus internally and externally, right? Or whether we should focus internally and externally and not only at the competitors, right? Not everything that the competition does, whoever the competition is the right thing to do. We got to check really both internally our capabilities and externally our circumstances before we actually try to do something. Here's an example. I just work with a large organization in the US that is doing agile. And the reason that they do agile is because the competition is doing agile, right? It's still happening, and it's quite staggering the amount of money they're investing in that thing, and they don't even know exactly why they're doing that. Speaking of taking on a change that they don't know the destination. And another barrier to change is failing to finish, right? Many times, whenever we start getting traction or momentum, we call it a day, we say, okay, we win. I mean, there was an example, it was called George W. Bush, that went and said mission accomplished way too prematurely. Only recently, Biden said we beat Corona, right? And all of a sudden they realized that it's not the case. So this is human nature, right? We get happy, we get excited, and we forget that we actually have to bring it to the finish line. And by the way, then some, right? We got to be able to sustain that. And let's keep in mind also that there are some challenges. We usually don't frame the change properly. It means that we don't scope it properly. And we tend to believe that it's going to be smaller and easier, right? It's related to what we said before. Remember, hope is not a strategy. So hoping it's going to be okay is not enough. Not having a vision starts at the very top of the organization. It's bigger than the strategy. It's a North Star that we sail toward, and there's going to be all sorts of trials and tribulations and turns and tides and currents, right? Just like sailing. Now, sometimes the vision is not clear, and many times the vision is not properly communicated down the organization. Another problem that we have been facing is failing to establish the cost of not changing. We keep focusing on the future, on the better way of doing things, forgetting that if we don't change, there is also going to be a cost associated with it. And usually most people in the organization don't see that. Obviously, we talked about the too many changes that are happening. So yes, we can try to focus and plan and whatnot for this change, but all of a sudden we have interlocking and other initiatives that are just crossing path with us. And we said it's not enough to bring it to the end line. We got to be able to sustain the change. And many organizations are realizing that sometimes the hard way, sustaining the change, is about using the same skills that brought us to that finish line, but ensuring that actually that success that we just supposedly delivered has enough glue to stick. And sometimes it's not the case. Many times it's not the case. Remember, it's not going to become human nature and in our DNA to do the things the new way just because we declared victory. We need to make sure that it sticks because people will still have a tendency to default backwards to the familiar. Let's have a little bit of a poll, right? I want to ask you a little question, right? What is, and I think we're going to have the poll coming up. Yes, great. What is your experience with managing change? And we have three options. Oh, we already have somebody who said the truth, right? So there's an option we are very good at that. There's an option that we're not so good at that. So and so, and then there's an option that says, right, not so much, right? And I see that there's a breakdown between telling the truth, and sometimes the truth is not really ideal, right? So I see that the majority of you already started answering. Let's give it a few more seconds. But yeah, oh, somebody says we're very good at that, which is always very encouraging, right? Obviously, it means that that organization you're referring to is taking the right approach, taking it seriously, giving it the time, giving it the capacity, right? Stuff is not going to be done in and of itself on its own because you say it's going to be great. People are not going to take your word for it. Great. I think we have a majority of people, yes, and the large majority of people said, yeah, sometimes this, sometimes that. So that's a good news. The less good news is that when you say sometimes we are good, sometimes we are not, what is it, 50%? So for baseball, 50% is going to be okay. For predicting the weather, 50% chance is not so much okay because I can tell you right now, 50% chance for rain or snow tomorrow. Right? So excellent. Thank you for that. Let's move on with that. Another thing to consider is change sponsorship and leadership. Right? The sponsorship of change is very similar by nature to the sponsorship of projects, and by nature, it's not usually done properly. It says here that the fish rots from its head. It translates a lot better in Hungarian or in some other languages, but it is true, right? We need to have the leadership, and it has to start from the very top. We need to know who the sponsor is. We need to know how much clout they have in the organization, and above that, we need to know how much capacity they have. It's not enough just to have a speech and drive everyone up front. The sponsor needs to be there involved on a regular basis. And the sponsor, just like the leaders of the change and any other person who's involved, need to realize that there is going to be resistance. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of how much and at what stages. And there are three main causes when we look at why there is resistance. The wider cause at the bottom of the pyramid is going to be because people are unaware of what's going on. This requires simple communication, right? And just clarifying, because many times people just don't know exactly where we're going with it. The next level in the middle, smaller group, is when people know what's going on, all of a sudden they realize that they may not have the knowledge, the context, the training, right? The ability to actually do the things the new way. This is about coaching and handholding and communications. But then there's the tougher group to crack, which is at the top, these are the stakeholders that say, listen, I know what's going on and I know I can handle that. I just don't think it's the right thing. Or I don't like it. And here, reiterating and repeating ourselves is not going to help, right? Here we need to be able to actually negotiate trade-offs, understand where they're coming from, and at some point decisions have to be made as to, okay, are they going to buy in, or maybe somebody needs to make a decision about how we move on with that. But we got to recognize resistance is not going to fix itself, and it's not going to go away on its own without us really taking it seriously. We spoke about sustaining, keeping in mind part of going through a change and part of sustaining the change involves the need for resilience. Now, what are the main components of resilience? First of all, attitude. When we have people with a negative approach or complaining all the time about the nature of the change, it's most likely going to spread very quickly. We need to have the big picture, right? The change is not happening in a bubble or in a silo. We need to recognize, we said capacity and prioritization. We need to ensure that the initiative, remember we said context, is in context with the needs and the priorities of the organization. Of course, at all levels, we need innovation and creativity. It doesn't mean that we need to come up with new products and new approaches. It just means that we need to be able to take a look at things sometimes also from outside of the box. And of course, communication and collaboration that we keep coming back to. Is another thing when we talk about sponsorship and we talk about leadership, is realizing what makes one a good leader. And according to Forbes, this is an interesting find, that there are 8 essential qualities that define strong leadership. Right. First of all, enthusiasm, sincere enthusiasm in context. The integrity, right? Walking the talk. Remember, it comes with accountability, communications, loyalty. Decisiveness. Decisiveness is not hasty, not rush, right? Decisiveness is in context, with transparency, right? Take into account all the information that we have right now and do it in a timely manner. Yes, there's also the managerial competence, right? The day-to-day, not only the tomorrow. Empowerment. In any type of setting, we need to be able to empower stakeholders. And we got to have that charisma. We got to be able to actually get the followers to follow us. The next thing is talking about the new beginning at the end of the change, right? So we said it's not only about achieving the goal, and it's not only about sustaining it. It's also about, okay, how well or how poorly are we positioned toward the next change? Too many changes bring us to the finish line, exhausted, drained, maybe not necessarily biggest fans of our colleagues. That's probably not very good, right? So we got to be able to, first of all, come in as a stronger team than the one that we were when we started that journey. Because we got to be able to sustain and we got to be able to handle the next initiative. We got to be able to handle the next challenge that is going to be probably sooner than we realize. The other thing that will help us with that is to do proper lessons learned. And I wrote there 3 because there are 3 elements, 3 types of lessons learned we got to do. Number one, we usually do it, right, throughout or at the end, which is the process, right? Take a look at how we did, how it went, communications, risk, whatever it is, and learn from it. The second type of lesson that we need to do is the product lesson. The product lesson is going to be, okay, how well the product is doing, the process, whatever it is that we deliver. And the third type has to be done at the top level of the organization, and it's a candid look at, was it the right thing and the right approach to doing it. This is rarely done, but where it's done, it gives us great insight into how we can handle ourselves in the future, so at least we don't make the same mistakes again. This is not about finger pointing. This is not about finding someone to blame, which is finger pointing. This is more about, let's make sure that we really learn so we don't make those same mistakes again. And then we're reaching the end, connecting change to projects, right? I want to ask you another question in another poll. And the question is, does anybody like assumptions? right? So we have three options. Oh, yes, necessary but rather annoying, or the urban definition of assumptions, which is making something out of you and me. Let's see, 50-50. So first of all, I see somebody likes assumptions. Yeah, that makes two of us. Wow, two of you. Wow. Three. I'm encouraged. Okay, while you keep answering, let's just take a quick review. Assumptions are not about making something out of you and me. Assumptions are about planning. Actually, we cannot plan without making assumptions. Our only problem is that we don't like assumptions, we don't like talking about them, and then they end up biting us in nowhere. So our goal is to actually identify the assumptions and then document them. How? You can create a table, and the table will have 3 columns. What I need to know, who I need to know it from, and by when. So if I have to drive from the center of the universe in Toronto to Montreal, you're going to ask me how long it's going to take. You'll say 5 hours, so I can be there in 5 hours. Now, a couple of assumptions. One, weather and traffic, right? Which, again, this assumption really cannot be validated only as we go. But another assumption, and thank you for that breakdown of really kind of in the middle, which I'm encouraged that a third of you actually like assumptions. So the next question that I need to know is, who gives me, the next question is I need to know, do I have a car, or what form of transportation I have? Now, who gives me the answer? The car manager. So, as the car manager, I need to tell you that if you want me in Montreal in 5 hours, you need to give me a car within the next 15 minutes. Right? Now, what's going to happen if you don't give me a car, or if you are not available? If you see somebody in the chat saying something, center of the I don't think so. Oh, we're going next month to BC with our girls. I mean, we're very excited, BC and Alberta. So what I need to know, do I have a car? Who I need to know it from? The car manager. By when? In 15 minutes. What's going to happen in 15 minutes? If I don't have a car, it either becomes an issue or a risk. And it's then much easier for us to manage, because we know how to manage issues and risks. Issues are, we have a problem, I'm going to be late. Risk is, okay, we are going to have a problem in a few minutes, because then I'm going to be late. Try to change your approach to assumptions. I got to say, hands down, starting to manage assumptions, which I did it in 2005 when I was 5 years old, totally serves as the most beneficial thing that I've done in order to improve my ability to manage change and project and whatnot. Hands down, because it allows me to really communicate and set expectations, as opposed to badger people and then be reactive about it. Now, all these things that we've been talking about, remember, connecting projects to changes, where organizations fail, here's a list. Right? Portfolio, we said capacity and prioritization. Sponsorship, because we know that there's a problem, even wrote a book about it. Alignment, we talked. Context. Are you working on the business or in the business? Think about it. On the business, doing big things, strategy, growth, adding value. In the business, doing all sorts of admins, right, and whatnot. Try to think. It's not that it's bad to work in the business, but try to think about the ratio. Focus on what matters. There's the ORI manifesto that says, look, in a project, there's scope, time, and cost, yes, but there are also those things behind the scenes, risks, resources, communications, right? Assumptions, right? All these things that really help us drive things. Also, we need to define the success criteria properly and get the project manager to understand and properly manage the trade-offs of the project, right? What's more important based on the drivers. So these things are not rocket science. They are there to be able to actually help us not only deliver success in the project, but also deliver value for the organization. Last poll before we start wrapping up: how well does the organization connect change initiatives, big picture, to project initiatives? Right? A, strong alignment. B, so-and-so. C, okay. Yeah, exactly. Yes, some challenges. fair enough. Now, some challenges. The main thing is that it's encouraging that most of the time it probably works sort of well. Now, we need to be able to really identify where it doesn't work and why. Because if we don't recognize those areas where we fail, we are not going to be able to actually address them, right? We don't know what we don't know. Excellent. Thank you for that. So yeah, that's quite encouraging. And then what's next, right? So let's realize tomorrow is here, right? The pace of the change, the amount of changes. Yes, one day we're going to wake up and Corona is going to become an endemic. Did you hear that the government of Alberta said that they don't no longer require a quarantine? We got to be able to learn to live with that, right? And be careful and whatnot. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays along, but maybe it's better than having another lockdown, for example. The need for changing approach is overdue, right? We need to focus on value creation. We need to have well-rounded people that really collaborate with each other, bringing the change, if it's applicable, agile, which is definitely about organizational change, project management, and business analysis skills together, right? And as Deming said, it's not necessary to change because survival is also not mandatory, right? So we got to be able to keep that in mind because we cannot fall behind. And we see some organizations are ahead of the curve. They handle those changes or they even drive those changes. And some organizations are just not able to keep up with those things. So at that point, we just went over a little bit over half hour. Before I open up for questions, I wanted to thank you for tolerating me because it's not easy. These are the books that I wrote. And if you take my name, where's my pen? See that name with that spelling? If you put it in LinkedIn, you'll find only one person with that name anywhere in the world. There used to be others, but some people say that I took them out, which is not the case, but there's only one of me. So if you reach out, feel free, because if you have any questions now or later, feel free. All right, so thank you so much for having me, and I'm not leaving, but I think we're going to open for any questions if there are.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much, Ori. This was great. And welcome any questions from those who are still joining us. We'll pause here for a minute so that we can give you some time to type. And while we do that, I will also just share the Change Management Foundation Plus Practitioner, the certification that we have in change management that's available. I will add that to the chat here. And make sure that if you are adding any questions into the chat, you'll notice that you can indicate it will default to only showing your comments to all panelists. So just make sure you drop down and choose all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your questions. Ori, I'm wondering if you can speak directly to the certifications and talk through the process there, just for those who are interested, because this is something that's unique to this course. So please, over to you to give some details on that.
It's like a cooking show. I happen to have prepared some slides in advance. They are heavier in text, right? So there are two certifications, and the course involves two certifications. Right now it's being delivered virtually in a total of 8 sessions. So 5 sessions are going to be dedicated to the, each session is half day. 5 of them are going to be dedicated to the foundation certificate, and then those who choose, those who pass, which will be everyone, but those who choose can take also the practitioner exam, right? Foundation is about the methodology, practitioner is about applying it. So foundation is a simple, short time, but simple multiple choice question about the theories that we are discussing, and the practitioner is about a little bit more in-depth exam from APMG about how to apply that knowledge. Who should take this program? Any person who is part of, whether you lead the change, you sponsor the change, or you're the victim, sorry, the subject of the change. Did I say victim? Yes, I did say. But it is true, right? So really, the more people have context about how change works, the easier it's going to be to set expectations and to deliver success, right? We said the foundation, we have 5 sessions. So after the sessions, you schedule the exam within that following week and a half or so. The answers are going to be provided virtually immediately. And then after that, you go and do the practitioner with 3 more half-day sessions, and you schedule the exam again with the APMG afterwards. Then you have the CMP certification, the change management, and then you want to ask, what does it mean? Well, first of all, you could put those letters next to your name. It's globally recognized. APMG is a British organization, but it's definitely common and very common. It definitely enhances your change management knowledge. It gives you a great toolbox of all sorts of theories and practices that help you actually handle and better contribute to change. It will help the organization, of course, in communications, and it will help both you individually as well as your team. Now, we said APMG International, headquartered in the UK, recognized all over the world, aligned not only with the Change Management Institute, but also about consistency that benefits you and recognized globally. Right? I see that there is some sort of a question. Is this
And you
recognized?
already addressed it.
Yeah, see, I read minds. This is
You're
part of
reading
the
minds. That's right.
No, that's the MBA, but that's a different conversation. Oh, that's it. So yes, it's widely recognized, and it does really give this ProSci, right, that also has a certificate. So it does actually recognize ProSci as well, along with Carter and Sange and multiple other and Lewin, right, multiple practitioners and theorists that really put together a great, well-rounded picture that allows you to really provide a balanced approach to change, right? And really, it's not about following one methodology or another approach, right? It's not about the methodology at all. It's about, okay, with that range of knowledge and context, you can actually deliver a more successful change, probably with less pain than otherwise, because many people don't even realize what does it mean, right? What exactly organization change is. And speaking of a journey, again, there are going to be all sorts of trials and tribulations along the way before we actually manage to deliver that value.
And I really just love it and want to just, before we officially wrap up here, just emphasize what you'll find in the course description in that link that I provided in the chat. And it's around what you'll learn. And I just would love to read a few of the bullets here. You know, you'll understand, come away from the course understanding the human side of change, which I think is so important, and you addressed so well, Ori, and helping people and organizations deal more effectively with change. I love this, sustaining change by making it stick, and recognizing and addressing resistance to change, and developing effective change teams. So there's a lot of really meaningful work that you can apply to your jobs. But I suspect that there will be some applications from the course that you could apply, you know, some things that you could apply to things outside of work. So a lot of really meaningful takeaways that you'll get from this course. And just being mindful of our time, want to thank you, Ori, so much for putting together today's webinar and delivering it to us with such enthusiasm and humor. We really appreciate that. And for those who were able to join us today, we will be sending out an email later today that will have a recording of today's webinar, along with Ori's contact information, should you wish to reach out to him directly with any questions, as well as a link to the course so you can learn more and see when it is offered. And that is coming up. It will be offered beginning of October 8th. So you still have some time to consider it and add it to your plans. As well, we do have a section that's offered in the spring, which would be in April. So there are some options for you to choose from there. So thank you so much, Ori. Really appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Pleasure.
Take
Thank you
care,
so much
everyone.
for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.